My name is Patricia Monroe, though most people in town call me Pat. I was 65 years old at the time, living alone in a small blue-painted house near the quiet edges of Asheville, North Carolina. Asheville was known for its misty mountains, local art culture, tiny cafes that smelled like cinnamon at sunrise, and slow, peaceful evenings where even time seemed to walk in slippers. I used to love those evenings, but peace and loneliness often share the same silence, and sometimes you don't realize which one you're holding until it begins to feel heavy. For 40 years, I worked as a public library curator. My job was more than organizing books. It was preserving stories. I archived folklore, restored aging manuscripts, arranged reading circles for children, managed community storytelling hours, and helped young authors display their very first printed words. The library wasn't just my workplace, it was my world. The building had old oak windows, the scent of paper and ink floating through the air, floors that creaked like they were whispering forgotten tales. Every book felt like a human I understood better than most real people, because books never hid their feelings. My late husband, Daniel, always joked that I looked more at books than I looked at him. He'd grin when he said it. We were married for 38 years. He was a quiet man with loud kindness. He repaired old clocks as a hobby, believed pancakes tasted better at midnight, and could whistle better than any radio. Daniel didn't talk much, but when he did, the words felt like warm blankets on cold nights. When we lost him to illness, our house didn't just miss a person, it lost its pulse. Every clock he had ever fixed kept ticking, but time inside our home felt frozen. Without Daniel, the walls seemed taller, rooms seemed colder, evenings longer. The wind outside still rustled the leaves in the same rhythm, but inside nothing echoed back. I told myself that grief would soften with time, but grief doesn't really soften. It just learns to sit quietly in the corners of your life without interrupting your breathing. I had always imagined that in old age I'd be surrounded by laughter, maybe arguments too, scattered shoes, voices calling from other rooms, spontaneous trips to the local farmer's market, and dinner plans discussed loudly at the table. But life had written a different chapter. My children had grown, moved into their own worlds, and though I was proud of them, I could feel the distance stretching between us like a road no one drove on anymore. I kept the front porch light on every night, not because it was dark outside, but because a part of me hoped one day someone would think of coming home without announcing it first. I had two children, two universes I once held in my arms, both now grown into worlds, with their own weather patterns I no longer fully understood. My daughter, Naomi, was 36. She was sharp, stylish, confident, and incredibly smart. Even as a child, she carried herself like someone who knew the skyline belonged to her. She spoke fast, walked faster, loved things that glittered, success that showed, achievements that looked good in photographs. She worked in brand management, lived because of deadlines, believed in image, timing, and opportunity. Naomi's childhood drawings were always symmetrical, her handwriting neat, her emotions neatly wrapped, too. She hugged with one arm when she became a teenager, the kind of hug that said, "I love you, but let's keep it brief." She wasn't cold, just efficient with feelings. My son, Lucas, 34, was the opposite kind of storm. He felt deeply, smiled softly, worried excessively. He wasn't loud, but he carried silent earthquakes inside him that no one else could feel until cracks appeared. Lucas worked in logistics, managing supply chains, routes, dispatch, numbers, inventory. Work that demanded precision and calm, a calm I knew he often faked. Even when he was 10, if a potted plant looked thirsty, Lucas lost sleep. If a classmate was upset, he carried that sadness home like extra luggage. Growing up gentle in a fast world made his heart tired earlier than it should have. When Daniel was alive, our family balanced itself like perfect weight distribution. My husband's calm steadied Naomi's speed, and his quiet kept Lucas from overthinking too loudly. But once Daniel left, That equilibrium shifted. Naomi leaned harder into self-reliance, choosing control over vulnerability. Lucas leaned inward, hiding fears he felt shouldn't need sharing anymore. As toddlers, they fought over crayons. As teens, they fought over privacy. As adults, they simply stopped fighting, which to me felt scarier, because silence between siblings sometimes means peace, but most times it means distance disguised as peace. I saw them only on holidays, birthdays, or occasional Sunday dinners that felt more ceremonial than natural. Naomi would answer calls while eating. Lucas would eat while thinking. Conversations no longer wandered. They hopped directly from topic to topic like stepping stones. Health, bills, weather, work, sleep, repeat. I missed the mess, the noise, the random conflicts, the accidental truths spoken in interrupted sentences. I missed when love lived in the open instead of hiding between scheduled meetings. I told myself this was normal adulthood. They were busy. The world was busy. One day we would slow down together. But deep inside, a mother always knows when slow becomes distant, and when distant begins to forget the road back. The change came so gradually, I almost congratulated it as maturity at first. No dramatic fights, no slammed doors, no tearful confrontations. Just a gentle fading, like paint losing colour under sunlight over many summers. It started with conversations becoming shorter. A phone call that used to last 20 minutes turned into 8, then 3, then mostly messages. You okay? Busy? Later? Later rarely came. At family dinners, silence didn't feel like comfort anymore. It felt edited, like everyone was speaking in their heads, deleting the sentences before saying them out loud. Plates clinked. The clock ticked. Forks scribbled over food, but voices stayed seated in their chairs, hands folded. Naomi stopped asking for recipes. Lucas stopped lingering after meals. Their shoes faced the exit even when they hadn't arrived yet. I began noticing details that felt small, but sharp. The refrigerator had leftovers from dinners they never stayed long enough to finish. The porch swing moved less. The hallway photos gathered more dust. The walls heard fewer voices, and I heard more excuses than explanations. One evening, I casually asked, "Are you both happy?" Naomi smiled like she was presenting a report. "Of course, Mom. Everything's under control." Lucas nodded a half-second late, like someone reminding him where the script was. "Yeah, Mom. Just work is a lot. No eye contact, no follow-up, no emotional footnote." That night, after they left, I opened the windows, though it wasn't hot. I needed air to move, because the silence felt too still to breathe around. A mother knows many versions of silence. Tired silence, comfortable silence, thinking silence. But there is one silence that sounds different. It is the silence of avoidance. Something was being protected, hidden, or buried gently under "I'm fine" and "just busy" and "all good, Mom." The strange part was, I didn't even think they were hiding something from me intentionally. It felt more like they had built walls not to block me out, but to hold themselves in. And I was no longer sure if I was standing outside those walls or simply no longer part of the floor plan. I knew then that the shift wasn't about love disappearing. It was about love being stored in drawers no one opened anymore. And unopened love eventually gathers dust, like everything else. One night, long after the house lights were off, the idea arrived. Not loud, not dramatic, just undeniable. Mothers spend a lifetime watching their children, but rarely do we get to watch them when they think we're not watching. I didn't want confrontation. I didn't want explanations. I didn't want forced honesty. I wanted unfiltered truth. So, I decided on something that felt extreme, bold, and strangely logical all at once. I would disappear, but only halfway, just far enough to be absent, just close enough to observe. The next afternoon, during a calm lunch where sunlight fell politely across the dining table, I said it casually. I think I'll go on a long trip soon. Clear my mind. Don't worry about me. Naomi looked up, but not long enough for concern to land. Oh? That's nice. Good for you? Lucas paused a moment longer. That's good, Mom. You deserve a break. No questions asked. No details requested. No timing discussed. And in that absence of curiosity, the decision sealed itself. I packed a suitcase that night, not for a journey, but for a purpose. 2 outfits, toiletries, a notebook, a spare phone charger, Daniel's old wristwatch, and a family photograph from happier years. The suitcase felt heavier with intention than with weight. The next morning, I waved from the driveway like someone embarking on adventure and drove away slowly enough to believe my own performance. But I didn't go to airports. I didn't cross state lines. I didn't even change time zones. I rented a small wooden cabin 10 miles away, close enough for truth, far enough for anonymity. It smelled of pine wood and rain, with a single window facing trees that whispered without asking questions. No noise, no assumptions, no expectations. For the first time in years, my absence would speak louder than my presence ever did. I wasn't spying. I was understanding. I wasn't testing love. I was measuring distance. And distance, unlike words, never lies. Day 1 passed quietly. I busied myself unpacking, convincing my heart this was wise. Some habits are louder than logic. I checked my phone once, twice, then set it face down, the silence buzzing louder than any ringtone. No call, no message, no, did you reach safely? Day 2 arrived with rain tapping the roof like gentle reminders. I made coffee, watched steam rise, and told myself not to read meaning into quiet. But even coffee couldn't distract me from noticing that absence occupies more space than presence ever does. Still nothing. Day 3 carried a different stillness. Not painful, revealing. I wasn't disappointed. I was studying the emotional weather of my own children. And weather is not judged. It's understood. That afternoon, while walking to a nearby store, I overheard a familiar voice, Lucas, speaking urgently on the phone outside a closed cafe. His words were strained, voice kept low but breaking at the edges. If I can't fix this by next month, it all collapses. I don't know what to do anymore. There it was. Not arrogance, not neglect, not indifference. Fear. Unspoken, unpaid, unseen fear. Later that same evening, a small-town coincidence placed Naomi in my line of hearing too. She sat inside a parked car, talking to someone through speakerphone. I mean, the house is basically going to be mine someday anyway. No malice, no softness either. Just a statement of future ownership, spoken without present emotion. 2 truths standing side by side, one drowning, one detached. And suddenly it all made sense. Their distance wasn't born from cruelty. It was born from survival, self-absorption, pressure, pride, and emotional inexperience. They loved me, but they didn't know how to hold love while holding their own storms. And sometimes love without attention becomes invisible, even when it still exists. But invisible love still leaves footprints. And now, I could finally see them clearly. The first 3 days had opened a door I didn't even know was locked. Silence was no longer confusing. It was diagnostic. And diagnosis always hurts more than doubt. I had always believed distance comes from choice, from intentions and cold decisions. But what I was discovering wasn't coldness. It was clutter, emotional clutter, scattered fears, unpaid emotional bills, unspoken shame. Words that couldn't find their timing. Love that existed but lacked language. Lucas's voice that afternoon still echoed in my mind, not dramatic, not loud, just exhausted. If I can't fix it by next month, it all collapses. A sentence filled with edges, one I could physically feel. It was spoken by a man who had learned to hide wounds instead of healing them. A boy who grew up gentle but believed adulthood demanded armor. Lucas was drowning in problems he didn't want to name, not because he wanted to deceive me, but because pride sometimes dresses itself like protection. And then Naomi's voice, hours later, casual, forward-facing, detached. The house is basically going to be mine someday. It stung, not because of the sentence, but the absence around it. There was no tenderness before it, no hesitation after it, no, but Mom still has so many years. No, I'm not ready for that. No emotion padding the ownership. Just lifestyle math spoken without emotion. I sat that night on the edge of the cabin bed holding two truths at once. One child, drowning in quiet panic. One child walking forward without looking back. Neither malicious, neither mindful. My job as a mother had always been to teach them to walk. Now I realized I had to teach them to look back too. The silence between us had not formed because love left. It formed because adulthood arrived faster than emotional maturity could keep up. They weren't trying to abandon me. They were trying not to fail themselves. And I was standing in the quiet aftermath of that struggle, holding the emotional balance sheet of a family that never learned how to use words when it mattered. So I did the only thing a mother with a storyteller's heart and a librarian's logic could do. I observed more, judged less, and prepared for the moment when truth would finally need a voice. On the fourth morning, I made tea differently, slower. The situation required patience, not reaction, understanding, not heartbreak. The world outside the cabin was unaware of the emotional audit happening inside. I realized Lucas didn't fear failure. He feared disappointing me. And Naomi didn't crave the house. She craved stability, identity, and certainty in a world where nothing feels secure without ownership. Both were reacting to life, not to me. But reaction can still wound. Lucas carried debt like a secret heirloom he was convinced he had to inherit alone. It wasn't irresponsibility. It was collapse avoidance mode. Late payments, too many responsibilities, too much self-reliance, too little vulnerability. He treated struggle like a personal exam no one was allowed to supervise. Naomi carried ambition, but ambition without emotional context becomes measurement instead of meaning. Success was her emotional language. Control was her love dialect. If she could secure something solid, like the house, then uncertainty couldn't break in. Her world valued achievement over softness, not intentionally, but instinctively. Neither were villains. They were adults who never realized they were still carrying childhood expectations in adult-sized boxes. I began remembering all the tiny signs I once overlooked. Lucas always offering to handle family paperwork, sitting silently at the table far too late at night, jaw clenched when bills showed up, laughter fading when numbers entered conversation. Naomi rearranging rooms, checking property apps casually, asking about maintenance costs instead of memories, photographing spaces more than people. Things I once considered personality quirks were actually emotional breadcrumbs. And I, busy trusting adulthood, never followed the trail. That morning, as the sun climbed behind misty Appalachian trees, I realized something heavier than disappointment. Parenting doesn't end when children grow up. It only changes shape. And sometimes guidance isn't given with speeches. Sometimes it's delivered through disappearance, silence, and a mirror held at the right angle. Which meant my job wasn't done. It was transforming. If decades in a library taught me anything, it was this. People rarely respond to instruction, but they always respond to realization. I couldn't lecture Lucas into honesty or guilt, Naomi into compassion. That's not how change enters the heart. Change needs collision, soft, controlled, undeniable impact. A teacher doesn't force a student to learn. A teacher creates circumstances where learning becomes unavoidable. And suddenly, my professional history made sense in a deeply personal way. I wasn't just a mother. I was still a curator of stories. And my family was living inside one that needed editing, revision, and an overdue resolution. I spent hours journaling, not with sadness, but strategy, thinking not about blame, but response, not about punishment, but correction that builds instead of breaks. My goal was not to shame them. My goal was to awaken them, because unawakened love becomes entitlement, but awakened love becomes responsibility. I asked myself hard questions. Do they know they're losing something? Have they ever seen me as someone who can walk away? Do they think love is permanent, even when unmanaged? Do they believe presence is guaranteed, even when ignored? The answer to all was yes. They believed my love was unconditional to the point of invisibility. A foundation so permanent, they forgot to look at it. A currency they never feared losing. And that is where distance begins. Not in anger, not in abandonment, but in assumed permanence. So my plan formed not as punishment, but revelation. I would return, but not the same. I would speak, but not loudly. I would correct, but not collapse. And most importantly, before I gave them my words, I would let them face themselves first. Because the loudest realization is the one you hear in your own silence. On the fifth evening, I folded my clothes slowly. Not like someone ending a journey, but like someone beginning a confrontation with truth. This was not about theatrics. This was about clarity. I rehearsed nothing, because real moments don't need scripts. I polished no emotions, because emotions polish themselves when the moment is honest. I packed the same suitcase I had left with, but it no longer felt like escape baggage. It felt like punctuation. A period doesn't end a sentence. It completes it. As I drove back toward my house, the sky carried a pale storm grey, the kind before rain when the world pauses to inhale. My windshield reflected the clouds like unspoken thoughts. The radio was off. The truth didn't need background music. I imagined opening the door again. Not as the woman who quietly left, but as the woman who quietly learned. I did not crave apologies. I did not rehearse tears. I did not prepare accusations. What awaited was simply two grown children who needed to see that love is not an ownership contract. It is a living exchange. Unfed love doesn't die, but it does starve. As I neared home, my "didn't call," I began. No response came fast. That told me everything. I know the house has been part of conversations I wasn't invited to, I continued. Naomi looked down. Lucas exhaled sharply. I didn't let the quiet save them from the point. And I know, I added, turning my head toward him, that debt has been heavier than honesty. Lucas's face cracked first. Men don't always cry quickly, but when guilt shakes the foundation, tears come without permission. How did you know? He whispered. A mother always knows when silence is hiding something louder, I answered. Naomi blinked, trying to hold composure. We didn't mean to. Intent doesn't erase impact, I interrupted, voice steady, calm. You not meaning to doesn't mean it didn't hurt. Lucas rubbed his forehead. I didn't tell you about the loans because I wanted to handle it. I didn't want to sound like a failure. A son asking for help isn't failure, I said. A son waiting until help becomes too late is. Naomi fidgeted with her hands. And the house? I never said I wanted to take it. I just assumed. That assuming, I leaned forward, is where entitlement grows teeth. They absorbed every word. No self-defense, no emotional shields left. I left to test distance, I confessed. And distance told me the truth. Their faces didn't rebel. They accepted the verdict without appeal. Lucas's voice broke. I'm sorry, Mom. Naomi's tears finally fell. Me too. I don't want apologies, I replied softly. I want awareness. Remorse fades. Awareness lasts. The room felt different after that, like air returning after suffocation. I didn't slam doors. I didn't threaten to leave again. I didn't pull the dramatic exit card. Hurt can demand revenge, but healing demands structure. I'm not here to punish you, I told them. I'm here to reset reality. They didn't speak. They listened like two adults finally meeting consequences without romance. I continued. The house is legally secured now. Not out of spite, out of responsibility. Two pairs of eyes lifted toward me, not angrily, respectfully. You still own it, Lucas said quietly. No, I corrected. I protect it. For me. Until my last breath, Naomi swallowed. What do you want from us? Honesty as a default. Not an emergency behavior? I said. Then I placed conditions gently, like rules written in pencil that could darken over time. No financial decisions about family assets without a transparent table conversation. No emotional distance disguised as independence. Help is no longer a shameful word in this house. Trust will not be returned in speeches, only in actions. They nodded, not reluctantly, realistically. Lucas spoke first. I want to fix this. All of it. You already started, I said, when you stopped defending and started admitting. Naomi exhaled shakily. I didn't realize I was acting like I already lost you. And that's where you made the biggest mistake, I said. You mourned a future loss instead of valuing the present person. Accountability landed gently but firmly, like rain, not storm, but unavoidable. Night finally settled. No one cried anymore. No one argued. The heavy part was over. What remained was the repair stage, the unglamorous part of rebuilding, slow, quiet, and real. I stood near the window. Outside, Asheville rested under moonlight and mist. Somewhere far, a train horn sighed. Life moving, unbothered, continuous. Lucas washed dishes silently. Naomi folded laundry she didn't need to fold. Not chores. Apologies with motion. I thought of the woman who drove away 4 weeks ago. Hurt, unseen, unheard. I looked at my reflection now. Still 65. Still a widow. Still a mother. But no longer a woman waiting to be valued. A life lesson didn't need applause, just embodiment. I turned to them and said, almost like a concluding line to a chapter no one wanted, but everyone needed. Love shown too late becomes memory, not healing. They felt it. I saw it land in their posture, not just ears. Outside, the trees swayed like they were nodding in agreement. And in that quiet, something finally repaired. Not because it was easy, but because it was witnessed.